you come up with the right price to pay, right? Now, all that now we are doing, fundamentally with our bots, right? Which will talk to customers, in multiple languages, negotiate if necessary, and come up with, the right solution that they may need. Third thing I'd like to say is some of the things that, was there in the previous session, a great move that we are seeing is towards assist, right? What really makes a lot of the assist possible is definitely some of the things with generative AI, because a lot of the stuff that we used to do in answer to an earlier question was around intent-based flows, right? And with generative AI now you can handle a lot of stuff that's out of domain, right? And that's the power that it brings to the table.
But Ganesh, how much of an enhancement do you see, when you are using the AI part of it, what we see as traditional AI, and now with generative AI? I think Kishore did refer to that in some way. So if you could.
So I think firstly it's an orchestration today, right? Just to give you an example, earlier we're using intent-based flows, right? There's a second option today. Can everything be done by generative AI flows today? Not much, okay? But can it be done in the future? Yes, a lot more, okay? And today the way we operate is, use like intent-based flows maybe for something that's very much in your niche, in your domain. I'll give you an example, maybe, risk of monopolizing this, just take a couple of minutes, essentially, let's suppose you're ordering a shoe from an e-commerce store, right? And you have a chat bot or a voice bot, or something that makes that happen. You ask some questions on, give me white colored shoes, right? And you give me slip-ons, and then you're able to filter it, and you're able to do that. So that typically would be an intent-based flow, right? But let's suppose you ask a question like we're working with one of the large shoe manufacturers, right? You ask a question like, I got really bad arthritis knee pain. Can you suggest a shoe from your store? Now this is where your generative AI comes in, where it will identify some characteristics, right, of what shoe you can have and all that kind of stuff, and then you orchestrate it with the information that you have, right, on your about the intents and so this can be done, and we'll talk more in two ways to answer the earlier question. Either you can fine tune or build your own models to make this happen.
Yeah, I think the prince would have been very happy when he went around to find taking the shoe and going to Cinderella, going all to town to try to fit out which shoe fits. Probably if he had AI or generative AI, life would have been so much easier. We have had two vendor points of view. These are people who provide the solutions. Now let's ask the users whether they believe in this hype or whether they do not see this as much hype. Vidhya, you're associated with the BFSI sector. I know that you cannot speak about your own bank, but that's fine with us. But give us a sense of, when you look at the BFSI sector, the financial sector, lots of regulations out there. Here you have, of course, AI. You are the AI head of delivery anyway. And also, now that you have this new animal that you call generative AI, what is the kind of potential that you see, and how much of it is hype? How much of it is a big challenge out there?
To begin with, it is out there. It is the biggest white elephant that we can find in any room. It is going to stay there. So hype, yes, of course. There's a lot of hype around it. Having said that, I do see a lot of potential, because immediately we can actually put this into use for many perennial problems that the banking sector had faced before. For example, your fraud detection used to be very difficult, because all we were able to do, despite having machine learning and AI allowing us to do a lot more than earlier, we were able to see the patterns and also look at how it is going to impact, or how I can stop it before it is happening. Having said that, now generative AI actually allows me to go one step beyond, because there is always going to be an imbalance. You will not find 50% of fraud transactions and 50% of good transactions in any database. You're going to see a solid imbalance between these two data sets. So when I have to do this using generative AI, I would probably use a generator and a disruptor model, GAN, we call it the GAN algorithm, which actually can synthesize the fraudulent data and allows the other part of it to detect and see if that is going to be as real as it is. So this is just a simple example. This can be put to use today, right? And there are other examples, like we have a lot of problems with privacy, data privacy. We cannot use our customers' data as we please. We can only use it for the approval or the agreement that we have gone through with them. We cannot go ahead and use it for anything. And all of us get pissed off when we get cold calls for any sales or marketing. So it's as bad as that, right? So what do I do? If I don't have customer data, I can always do this synthesizing using generative AI and move forward to actually demonstrate that I can handle any perennial problems or potential problems which are coming through. So this is how generative AI is going to help us, and it can be done as of today. But there is always a but, right? So this cannot be done immediately because, like you said, we have our regulators asking us the valid question like, how much do you trust this? Because it is a new animal. Everybody knows about elephants. Probably this big white elephant is scaring a lot of people, and rightly so, because we don't know how it is going to react. So it's worth a wait and watch. I would say that we have potential. In fact, Gnani.ai is coming up, has actually done 7 working groups to discuss and decide how we can bring a framework, a governance framework around AI, so that we can live in peace and also advance in our overall countryside. So that's where I'm still on the fence, but yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, probably it's a good idea to stay on the fence for a little while longer. But let's ask another user company. Bipin, Venki, I will keep you for the last because I know that you come with a very different experience. So that's why I've kept you for the last. Bipin, now you run a different kind of company that people are not generally used to. Like we are talking of the bacteria in our gut, basically. But yes, AI and ML have been used extensively in drug discovery, for instance. And I said, as I mentioned in the earlier panel also, that the strength of generative AI is that it treats everything as a language, including your DNA. I think these are very exciting times for the company like yours. Could you give us some examples of how it is being used in your own company?
Thank you, Leslie. So we are a microbiome company, as Leslie mentioned. What is the microbiome? It's to do with all the microbes, the bacteria, fungi, etc., that live in and on you. Of course, the largest place where it resides is in your gut. So we genetically sequence your gut bacteria and tell you what is right or what could be made better for you. Because the science now tells us that bacteria that live in us do a lot more than just living in us. They produce several metabolites, hormones, your dopamine, serotonin, a lot of them produced by bacteria. Now, how do we do this? We genetically analyze it, right? What is genes? In the earlier panel, Jayant and Jasprit spoke about language. In our language, English, for example, we have 26 characters. Yeah. What is a gene? It's your DNA is just 4 characters. Imagine what you can do applying what language was supposed to do, what GPT was supposed to do for 26 characters to these. What about your proteins that you have in you? It's a language of 20 amino acids. It's a language of 20. So imagine how you would apply these large language models that we talk about to things that are there with you, in you. So that's one of the major areas that we're applying language models to understand you better. I can't think of a bigger opportunity than that. That is one. And the second is a more practical way. Now that we understand you, you have these bacteria. What's that? We don't do drug discovery, by the way. We do just diet. So we know that these metabolites are produced by these bacteria, but these bacteria require these biochemicals given by this food. Now, when you look at it that way, one of the things that we need to generate is recipes that are relevant for you. And what better way to generate recipes than use, pretty much open source tools like, GPT-3. But of course, in the whole bio world, there are more appropriate GPTs. There's a PubMed GPT, there are bio GPTs, BioBirds, things like that. Recently, I think Google launched MedPalm. So there are relevant ones in our industry too. But yeah, we use it in completely different ways from most other folks. And I think we'll continue to use it. I think we need all the, in some ways we say that we're pushing the boundaries of human ignorance almost every day. We didn't know that we didn't know so much. When we start applying these new models to these completely different areas, it opens up new boundaries.
Yeah, imagine, there's more than 2 kg of bacteria in our body, right? Yeah.
As much as in your brain.
Imagine.
As much as in your brain.
Yeah. I hope it doesn't.
As much as the size of your brain, rather.
Yeah, it's quite a revelation, and the way AI, ML, and now generative AI is being created, to generate these recipes out here. Very interesting. Venki, you have been interacting with so many companies in your lifetime. You have been seeing them, use AI. Now they're talking about generative AI. You are the proponent of open source, so I know that you talk a lot about open source AI, Llama being the poster boy of it, and of course there are plenty of others, which I think you are the better expert out there to talk about these things. Give us a kind of an example of what companies are asking from an opportunity point of view.
I think, so one of the conversations I had was with an investor who's looking at creating an agri-tech startup. And he was talking about using drones to create financial models and give loans on the basis of flying the drones. So kind of like a credit rating for land or a property. I think that's kind of interesting this, and I think the potential of that is that
uses GIS or something.
GIS plus looking at what is the how fertile is the land, geomapping, image sensing, etc. So I think that's a huge thing. And frankly, I think we need to look at these kind of opportunities because if I just step back, I'm a policy guy. So basically, the question is, are we shaping technology or is technology shaping us? In some areas like digital public infrastructure, Aadhaar, UPI, etc., we have been shaping technology. Here, the technology is shaping us. Now the question is, the second order question is, okay, it is shaping up, but how can we now make the best of it? And today, I think the big problems in India are how do we improve agricultural productivity? How do we improve manufacturing productivity? So I think these are areas where we should aggressively deploy these kind of technologies. The other interesting area that I am seeing is, I was speaking to a startup at IIT Bombay, and this is a bootstrapped startup. So he said, instead of hiring people, I've just been using ChatGPT for coding, and it's giving me a runway of for a few more months of bootstrapping without going out and raising capital. So I think 2 different extremes of utilization.
Fair enough. Now we'll come a bit, we have seen the kind of opportunities that all the panelists have spoken about. We'll look a little at the challenges and limitations, not from the point of view of, okay, of course they have hallucinations and fake news, misappropriation, and plenty of other things like voice cloning, etc. But we're not talking about those things at this point in time. We'll talk more about, Kishore, let me start with you. You have a lot of APIs there, a lot of plugins where when we talk about generative AI models, like whether it's ChatGPT or whichever one, whether Llama, Lambda or Llamas or whatever it be, they have APIs, they have plugins. The understanding is they deal with external data. Here, when you get it back to a company, what exactly is the process out there? How easy or how difficult is it for companies to use these APIs, to use these plugins, and start business and enhance the value of their own businesses?
That's the most important question for sure. As we speak, I think yesterday, 1 week back, there's a new model which was launched by Abu Dhabi University. It's better than Llama is what they said. It's Falcon, it's a 40 billion model. It's pretty good is what people are saying. Yeah, we're figuring out and we're working with them to see how it works. As the fundamental models as it is, utilizing as it is a big challenge, because one of the largest BFSI companies in India, non-banking NBFCs, we're working with them. And we tried, they took our help to overall, the notion was GPT can solve everything. Or GPT-4 as it is, I take the fundamental model, I'll be able to replicate whatever automation that I can do with it, is what the notion was. And then we started working with them to make sure that let's see if that can happen, and then how we can contribute is what we thought. And then over the process, what we realized is it's not as straightforward to just out of the box using these fundamental models, because there are multiple workflows involved in getting into a proper shape and form to actually put it in a real world use case. For example, if I am putting, I am trying to automate an ordering use case. Just for that case alone, you might have, there are like 10, 50, obviously the conversation can be very fluidic in nature, but you might have to actually plug in multiple APIs at multiple places in the conversation to give the exact right answer at every single point in time. And though the hallucination can be, for example, humans also make mistakes, so AI can also hallucinate. That's what the notion is. And when you're putting it to a small niche use case, you cannot have hallucinations. It has to be very precise in nature so that the conversations can happen, and then you can place that order. When you are making you want to order food, you want to order food. You don't want hallucination in that. It has to be very precise. So in this case, so basically we have to separate out the information retrieval systems. So you might have to call these fundamental models 10 different times at every single message, at message level. Every single interaction level, you might have to call these LLMs 10 different times and orchestrate between them. And you might have to deal with information retrieval systems like Pinecone and stuff like that, the embedding search as we are vector databases and stuff like that. You have to work with orchestrate from that, and your traditional workflows. So it's a combination of like 10 different things to get to a proper use case is what my take on this is. And I think that's what we are seeing as well with the customers.
Makes a lot of sense. Ganesh, the same question to you, because enterprises have got so many other departments, whether it's an HR department, operations department, logistics department, finance department, so on and so forth. Now, when you talk about these plugins, these APIs, as Kishore said, it's quite a task. Maybe the models also have to be fine-tuned. You have to keep a tab on the hallucinations and other kind of limitations of things. Because I think the end user doesn't care whether you're using GPT-3, GPT 3.5, GPT-4, Llama, they don't care. They want a result. So could you take us through what that process involves? What are the kind of pitfalls? And how do you match client expectation? They come up with the expectation everything's going to happen in a jiffy.
So I think, Leslie, that's a very good question, because recently someone said, I want you to use only GPT-3, right? And I want you to do a real-time voice-based system today, right? And and somebody told me that you can do it in 2 days, so I need it for you. I mean, you need to develop that. But the reality, for example, if you, I'll give you one example here. For example, if you use GPT, right? GPT-3, and you'll see that latency is a very big issue, right? And if latency is the issue, you can't use it really for real-time voice systems, right? It's not going to work, because you can't have people waiting for 4 seconds before a reply comes, right? So like that, there are other, obviously, challenges today, but these, because it's, like someone else said, this is at very early stage, right? Second is stability, right? You can go out and use any of the open source stuff, right? Again, because people are worried about privacy. Right now, the thinking in almost all companies is, okay, let's get out of this GPT and other stuff and let's go for open source. Either fine-tune it with our own data, right? Or not only fine-tune, but actually use our own data to make that happen, right? Can we develop our own LLM? That's the new thought as well, right? Then people are, today the practical issues, again saying this could be temporary, is that issues of stability, right? None of these models are stable, right? Thirdly, if you're using GPT and other stuff, you have issues with enough tokens being available for a production system, right? So there are multiple issues. We don't know how much will be temporary, whether this latency and other issues will be sorted out. But fundamentally, the current thinking is, manage. You need to manage customers and tell them that this is practical, and try to leave out the hype. And but there is an enormous potential. But the thinking today is, let's use more on the open source stuff, right? And where you try to avoid the larger systems that are built on more parameters, right, which have a lot of these other issues. Also the bigger issues on privacy, right? Like banking and other systems, they all jump for it for POCs, but then they said, look, if our data is going out, what do we do, right? And these are some of the other issues that are there. Having said that, we know the power of some of these large corporations. So over time, it might become acceptable even for large banks to, use maybe a cloud call to GPT-3. We don't know how that will go. But today, the thinking is, let's use open source stuff in the enterprise. Let's fine tune it. Let's orchestrate it with our intent-based flows and see what can work. Right. So today, that's the thinking.
Yeah, and I think we also had this case of Samsung, basically, where they put out that code out there, and then, of course, they had to.
Add something on. I'd love to add something on fine tuning. So the popular opinion on fine tuning is that you give your enterprise data, and then model will give you appropriate answers. So fine tuning is not basically, you can't give your data to fine tune. Fine tune is more of, so what we are calling it as we've been fine tuning on the top of Llamas, GPT-J and Falcon we started trying out. So this is more of a structured fine tuning on the use cases. What use case that you can fine tune than the data. But popular opinion on enterprise companies is that they because of, I think obviously because of the news around that you can fine tune GPT and you can put your data and then it works out magically, it will correct, reduce hallucination. That is one thing that is completely, the thought process has to change, that companies cannot just upload their data and then GPT magically won't respond correctly. It will still give you the same hallucination problems. It's more of use case fine tuning that you can do, like you want a specifically you want the bot to talk in specific brand language. You can fine tune it that way. You can fine tune the language, the way you want it to respond. Or you want, for example, we do summarization really well. We fine tune the 7 billion model to make sure the summarization is like really spot on, doesn't have any.
But even that's a continuous process, right?
Yes,
the fine tuning, because
yes.
You have to keep the thing up to date.
Yes.
So there's a cost to the computing.
Yes, there's a cost to them.
That's another thing that I don't think most people account for. Venki, you wanted to add something.
I think the privacy issue which Ganesh pointed out is a really important one, because there have been studies, people famously, Lantana Sweeney at Harvard had found that if you combine 3 different data sets, you can actually start pinpointing the pin code of individuals, etc. And with AI, the risk I see is that there is very little agency. In fact, now I think people are arguing that as individuals, we have the right to reasonable inferences by AI models. So this is going to be a huge nightmare, and I don't know how it can be solved. Having said that, maybe in India, we may be slightly better placed than other countries, because we have systems like the account aggregator through which information can be shared in a consented format. It can be pulled by the financial information users with user consent, and then you can run models on it. And then maybe you can also add confidential clean rooms where my data is not going out, but the model is coming, looking at my data, and then doing analysis. So I think privacy, AI privacy in India might shape up very differently in India compared to the rest of the world, because we have the architecture for consented data flows.
Yeah, but interestingly speaking about security, privacy, interoperability for that matter of fact, you have two users out here, one is from the BFSI sector, the other from the healthcare sector, if I were to broaden the thing, where here clearly privacy and security are so integral to the system, and there it could easily mean difference between life and death of a patient. Who of you would like to shed more light on that?
I was listening to Brett King recently. He's the futurist. He talks about AI and the future, basically, technology future. So he was saying that, I don't need to hack any system to find out what data you have or what are the basic data that I have to open an account or find out which bank you have and how to access your account. I can simply do a social surfing and I can get it. Your mother's maiden name is very visible to me. Your date of birth, as a friend, I can get it anytime, and Facebook anyways has that. So these are basic things that anybody can access. Like Venkat mentioned, it is little secure in India. We don't, really open up ourselves. We are little conservative, for the good part of it. We are little conservative. We are taking slow steps, and we will definitely arrive at a place where we are convenient. We are convinced that we can still trust this system. We can still trust this organization. I think privacy definitely has a superiority over anything else. People don't care. If it is going to hamper my privacy, I would rather not have it than go for it, than take a chance on it. This is the take. I think customers are very valid in thinking so. But having said all these things, it is the organization's responsibility that I keep up the trust. I work for you because I deal with your money. When I'm talking about BFSI, of course, it is good enough for the other organizations too. But I deal with your private data. I deal with your privacy. So I have to be 100% ethical and cautious before I do anything with it. So that's how it is.
Fair enough. Bipin, you'd like to add something?
For us, privacy, because of the way our systems are designed, privacy is not that much of a concern because we don't give much of the data out. The healthcare data, in that sense, is bound by regulations and all that is extremely private. Our systems are not out there in the public, particularly personal data. But if you were to ask me about the ethics of how AI is shaping things up, now that's a completely different domain because what is now possible. I mean, if there's this whole Moore's law, right? I mean, and everybody is familiar. These things double every 1.5 years, roughly. But in the drug discovery world, in the curing world, in the curative world, it's exactly the opposite. In fact, it's called Eroom's law, which is the opposite of Moore's law, which means that as time passes, the number of new things that get discovered is halving. I mean, now, in the context of this, what things like generative AI brings in is the ability to, and like I said, in the language of proteins, to simulate and visualize the interaction of different proteins among themselves. And then, of course, maybe you'll even discover new things. Now, in the ethics of all this, of course, this is completely against evolution, right? I mean, evolution has granted you a way in which you progress. But with these things coming in, you're, I would say, in some way, possibly bypassing what is what nature has endowed you with. So for us, on one hand, it is extremely exciting to do things like this. I mean, like I said, we don't do drug discovery, but just to give you the right food that is a model for you, that's fabulous. But what happens if we do something wrong? That is one. And what happens if things go out of hand? So these are questions which new questions which are cropped up with this whole AI coming in.
Yeah, I think this brings us into a very easily, allows me to easily segue into the third part of the discussion, that why do we require, guardrails around AI and generative AI? I think it's pretty obvious that, like say in the US, for instance, you already have the Bill of Rights. In Canada, you have IDA. Then in Japan, Brazil, China, you have some semblance of AI acts. I think Singapore has something very interesting. In India, you have the Digital India Act, which will supersede the IT Act 2000. But there's no separate mention of AI per se, as of now at least. I mean, whether they are, whether these India.ai frameworks sort of merge with that particular thing, I'm not too clear because there is no clarity on that. But as of now, it does not have a separate bill. But before I get into the third part, I would like to take a couple of questions. Yes, please. Could you identify yourself so that you have an idea? Just one sec. I think we'll go to mic. Because it's being recorded, so they'll require that for.
Hi, my name is Aditya. My question would be around the cost of computing and cloud GPU sort of scenario with everybody trying to adopt and everybody's trying to build a model, and especially enterprises now realizing that data and distribution is key to making models work and monetize them, right? So has it impacted any of you in terms of your ability to access cloud GPUs and I mean there's still inefficiencies around how organizations are being able to leverage and completely use those GPU instances they're able to get.
So basically whether it has increased the cost of implementation. Yes.
They're being reprioritized. That's my concern.
Anyone.
So GPT-4 and GPT-3 themselves are... Sorry. So GPT-4 and GPT-3 are themselves are really expensive. That itself says that the compute cost is really, I mean, it's not the same as what we used to run. It's not the same as what we used to run earlier. If you look at, for us, just to load one 40 billion parameter model, you require at least two of these Tesla A100, which is like really expensive. Really expensive, like around, if you have to buy it, it's around 150K USD. If you have to buy it in-house, it's really expensive to run. But at the same time, you don't need that to inference. So inference, you can get a smaller one. Cost of running it might be higher, but at the same time, the benefits of it is like, it'll obviously the cost might be higher, but you'll get the benefits of it the moment you deploy it. So that we are seeing the costs are higher in general.
I guess all companies anyway look at the return on investment. They'll be calculating it, and the financial benefits will be reasonable. Any other
Yes. Hi, this question is for Vidhya, right? Yeah, hi. I did do some work with the banks earlier. I run an AI automation company on using RP as a technology. Also partner with Yellow.ai in my previous life. It's a nice meeting you, Kishore. So coming to, from a use case perspective, yes, the detection of the fraud is definitely one of the major use cases, but also from the conversation perspective, since most of the conversation that bank deals with the customer is all contextualized, right? Is it possible to have those pre-built workflows, conversation workflows as a library and leverage them for a better engagement and user experience regarding any such conversations, be it on the product side, be it on the support side, be it on any issue side, because those issues are pretty common, isn't it? So is that something that the Standard Chartered Bank is thinking on those lines?
I cannot comment about Standard Chartered specific. But in the banking industry, we are filled with all these unstructured data, whatever you are calling, right?
Yeah.
So these are unstructured data. 80% of any bank's data is unstructured.
Unstructured, okay.
And there is a lot of work, both AI and ML, where they have, a lot of the banks also have come up with all these new innovations because it is all within the territory. So you can use your data, create the models, use it not only as OCR, but create an AI engine which can actually benefit to decipher what the document is about or what the conversation is about, overall idea, how do you, network this using graph technology to reach out to other regions to see if there is any pattern forming there. So all these are in the cards,
Okay.
it's building. And there are a few banks like JP Morgan, for example, have developed an AI engine, let's call it AI engine, which can read 800 to 900 legal documents, the pages on the legal documents, to give you a summary which can actually make a lot of sense. You don't have to deploy a person, but obviously you should need a knowledge base to understand and make sense of it. Because I personally, I will not understand any legal terminology, but if I have a knowledge base, then I can make sense of it. So this is how they are specifically looking at the individual use cases to develop something which can work for that use case. Having said that, they also see if there is a subsequent scaling up. How can I utilize the same technology or whatever I have built now for taking care of multiple other use cases, similar use cases? How can I make light tweaks so that I can move forward?
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Before I take other questions, Venki, could you give us a quick overview from a policy front as to what are the kind of guardrails that are being put around, or the guardrails that are being contemplated in both in this, given the tsunami of the generative AI?
I think clearly the job displacement is going to be a big issue. So we need to really seriously invest in reskilling. And unfortunately, that's an area where I think we have seen multiple ministers change over the last 6 years. I think we need to really invest in that. The other huge risk is, I think, given the kind of polarization that we have in society, if there is a chatbot that is, really, tuned to polarization, and in fact, I'm part of some of these WhatsApp groups. I'm already seeing, fake news coming in, AI-generated fake news, and I don't want to say this, but there was a video of Joe Biden farting apparently, and it was supposed to be a Fox News this. I go to the Fox News site and there's nothing like that on the Fox News site. So I think we are already seeing these kind of things emerging. So we will need to have methods by which fake news is tagged. For example, right now, the way child porn is tagged and eliminated in social media, there is a fairly good system, but I think now that will have to be scaled up at least 1,000 times or 2,000 times, because we are now dealing with the kind of data that is very hard to narrow down. So I think Google, for example, has taken a good step by saying that AI-created content will be tagged specifically so that it can be quickly identified. But in a world where millions of people are creating content using AI, how do you tag it? So I think there are a lot of these issues. I think we really need to, at this point in time, with a sense of urgency, sit down and figure out how can we maximize the value of this technology, especially in areas like agriculture, etc., where we really need maximum productivity and minimize many of these harms.
Yeah, I think you started out also early also, and which I remember, which we had discussed earlier also, that up till now, policy was defining tech. Now you find, this tech has come much before. Of course, I mean, policy really has not been able to keep pace with the furious pace at which technology has been moving. The treadmill has incredible. I'll come back to you. Any question from the audience? Yes, please. Please give the lady a mic.
My question is more from the development perspective. As a common user, I think we have very limited levers in terms of prompt engineering. But as a development companies, do the APIs giving you additional flexibility? He was talking about fine-tuning. Do you have additional capability to actually ride on the GPT engine?
So I think now, I think I would recommend that not only you look at GPT, you look at Bard, you look at Mosaic, for example. That's something that we really like, for example. And all of them now give you the ability, A, to fine-tune, B, to put your own data, right, and retrain, right? And there is, so my suggestion is go back. I think an earlier question was also on, can I use data for a niche, for an industry, how do I? So I think all of them have started giving this kind of opportunities. Be careful because none of them is really stable today, except for the bigger guys, right? And many of them are built with much smaller parameters, right? That's again, you have to, some of them are just about 10, 15 billion parameters, right? So, but that's fine, I mean, as long as you have the ability. But the most important factor is, if you want a system that works, it has to be stable. Otherwise, you go and develop it, and you can't launch it with customers. So I think that's something to be very careful about.
Ganesh, I have one question for you. Speaking about the fine-tuning part of it, I mean, Kishore or Ganesh, anybody can answer this. Typically, we're saying, okay, the fewer the parameters, they have in-contextual learning, and that's why they're becoming much better. But I've been speaking to a lot of other people who deal with these LLM. They're saying, no, it's not very true. There is this big debate about whether you require more parameters or can we really do with fewer parameters. Can you just clarify?
I think there is some magic number. I think it's 7 billion, or I don't know. It keeps changing. I think it's 7 billion today parameters. If it's that, then they say, okay, we can at least work with that. So I mean, but that parameter could change in the future. So be careful. But fundamentally, I mean, and this whole, like I said, these are great things for events like this because nothing has been proven in the, we have to see what, will happen in the future. But today's thinking is take something that's working well, open source, and, put in some of that data. And especially because companies have not made up their mind. And we also heard some of those things here. Right?
So in the enterprise space, the caveat is always consult an expert.
Yes.
Venki, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think from a policy perspective, the real challenge with AI is that, the unknowns are so huge. And frankly, I think now we are reaching a point in time where, we need an Office of Technology Forecasting. So the Singapore government has got something like that, and they do these modelings. For example, what happens if the sea level rises by, half a meter or whatever. So I think we need an Office of Technology where we proactively forecast and model different scenarios. And because I think frankly the pace of change is so fast that, just to give an example, earlier privacy laws used to say sensitive personal data, personally identifiable information will be regulated. But in an age of AI, that is completely irrelevant because I can combine multiple data sets and just, even if you don't share it with me, I can re-identify you. So within just 5 years, personally identifiable information, sensitive personal data has become outdated. So we are in a very era of highly volatile, rapid change, and we need this kind of forecasting model.
Yeah, also in the healthcare sector, I think Bipin would allude to that basically. Mostly you have the HIPAA laws, you have those kind of, they're very stringent rules, the financial sector, the healthcare sector, etc. But I think Ganesh said it, to put it rightly, for the discussion purposes, these things work, but when you actually get out into the field, it's a very complex field. So friends, as we saw that the potential clearly from AI to generative AI, whether you want to call it AI 1.0 or AI 2.0, enhanced 0, is clearly there. But of course, there are some challenges, there are some limitations. There are people who are working around these limitations. I think we just have to wait and watch. But yes, we have to be there. It's extremely important. I think the horses have already bolted from the stable. So generative AI is here to say the tsunami is coming. It's right for there to see. You have to prepare yourselves for it. And I think even in the previous panel, he said, it's not AI will take away the jobs. It will be people who understand AI and generative AI that will probably be the people who will take our jobs. So friends, I think we've had a lovely discussion. You all have been a very engaging audience. So please give the panelists a big hand.